Check out these little red wigglers. They're going to help us take our garden to the next level. Hi there, Lisa with Our Weekend Homestead, and we are out in the garden today to talk about compost. With the expansion of our garden this year, we realized that we are in need of another solution for getting compost to our property to use around our plants and garden. We are currently lugging home large bags of compost from the garden center and making our own compost in a compost bin that we purchased from the county. We don't have a great place to store the compost bin, and it's difficult to turn the compost in the bin, and it takes a long time for the compost to break down. So this year we upped our game and purchased a composting tumbler that makes it easier to turn the compost and makes the compost break down a lot faster. But we still need more compost here in our garden. What's most important to us about our compost is where it comes from and what's in it. We were recently introduced to worm composting or vermicomposting. This looks like something that we can easily do in a small space with little investment. Not to mention, it just seems really cool to raise your own worms. So we've purchased everything that we need to do this project, and the worms are on their way. Are you ready to build a worm composter with us?
First step was to order our worms. After looking up some reviews online, we chose Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. Their website was easy to use, and they had lots of choices as far as quantities and different types of worms. After that, we headed to the hardware store and picked up some supplies to build the composting bin. The next step is to put a drain in the lower tote. This will allow you to drain off any of the worm seepage. Worm seepage is not the same as worm tea. It's the excess moisture that comes from the upper bins. If your worms are too moist or there's too much water getting to them, it drains through and is a real brown, stinky liquid. So you want to get it out of there. Most people just use an ice chest plug, but I decided to make this way overcomplicated. Because I didn't want to have to remove the tote from our garden, I decided to build it using a remote tube and a valve, so that I could drain the seepage out of the bottom tote without having to remove the lower bin from our garden. I then put 2 blocks in the bottom of the lower tote. Bricks would have been a better choice here, but it's all I had on hand. This will help me determine the height between the lower tote and the middle tote. Once you've determined the spacing, you'll know exactly where to drill the 1/4-inch breather holes. When I don't need a precision hole but want to stay in a general area, I typically will use masking tape to help keep me on course. Now repeat this process on the other 3 sides. For the bottom of the tote, you're going to want to drill 1/4-inch holes, 2 inches on center. Once the holes are drilled, go back and deburr all of the holes both inside and outside, and repeat this process on the 3rd tote. Okay, so now we want to prepare the beds and get ready for our worms. Now that we've got the bottom prepared and it's ready to get the worm juice, we're going to go ahead and put on the 2nd layer. You'll notice it has the 1/4-inch holes on the bottom. I'm going to show you how to do this. We're going to do this in 3 different steps, and I'll go over the first step with you and then show you the rest from there. We take cardboard, and this will break down after the worms have done their thing. And for the first layer, we're going to put, I have some potting soil, not potting soil, but planter mix that we got from the local garden center. And it has a lot of organic bits and stuff in there. So what we're going to do is set that in there and put that as our first base layer. And we're going to add a little bit of paper. I like to shred my paper. I think it helps aid the decomposing and helps it just break down a little bit easier. And then we're going to take some compost that we use here in our garden that we made here, and we're going to add a little of that compost on top. And this still has a lot of, nutrients and stuff that, they'll get every little bit out of here by the time it's done. And then we're going to use a few amendments on this last layer. The first one's going to be eggshells. We keep our eggshells and run them through a food processor and grind them up. So I'm just going to add a little bit here, not a lot, and just kind of sprinkle it around. That'll do it. Next thing we want to add is a little bit of azomite. This also helps with some calcium, and it's another good amendment to put if you're making your own like seed mix or potting mix. You can pick up the azomite in small boxes, so it's easy to manage. And again, not a little goes a long way. And then lastly, we're going to use some kelp meal. And again, not a lot, just a little bit. And then we want to water that down. And then we're going to repeat this same step 2 times. Okay, now that the 3 layers are done, it's time to top it all off. We're going to use some of the food they like. I used to think the vegetables they ate, but what I found out recently is it's the enzymes, as it's rotting, they come up and eat that. So we keep some of our scraps laying around specifically for this. If you're going to use anything like banana peels, that's a good one they like. I like to cut stuff up a little bit here and there. I think it helps just kind of break it down. Be sure though when you're using like banana peels that it doesn't have any of the stickers that come on it. We're just going to cut some of this stuff up, spread it out. Found a sticker, so let's get rid of that. I don't know if cutting everything up really helps. It just seems like if we can shred the paper and cut a lot of this stuff up, seems like it should work. Just try to get it all contacted on the dirt. One of the things that's not particularly healthy for worms in high quantities is coffee grounds. You can use the filters, but you don't necessarily want to use a whole lot of the grounds themselves. And then we'll take a couple pieces of cardboard, set it over the top. The worms themselves don't like a lot of light. And we're going to let this kind of chill out for the next day or so. And then we'll go ahead and add our worms. What we're trying to do is give the water enough time and everything to settle so it's not super moist. They like moist dirt, but wet dirt they can suffocate in. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and put the 3rd tote on. We don't need to fill the 3rd tote at this point. We're just using it as a cover.
Worm advisory. I think I'm gonna wait for David.
All right, so here we are at our composting bin, and we want to introduce the worms. The weather's not ideal, but we want to get them in their bed as soon as we can. I'm gonna go ahead and open this up, and the food and stuff's been in here for about 2 days, so it's probably a little funky. We'll go ahead and open the worms. And they sent really nice instructions. They said that the worms will probably be a little small because they've been shipped and they can be somewhat dehydrated. And so I'm going to sprinkle them over the bin. Just going to try to be real gentle with them. And with the instructions they sent, they said one of the things to do is to sprinkle them a little bit with water. So I'm going to give them a little bit of a mist, and then to cover them with damp newspaper. So I'm going to cover them back up with their cardboard because they don't like the light. And we'll put the lid back on and we'll check on them in a couple of days. Okay guys, so here we are about a week later. We've already added some more scraps. We've already been in here a couple times, but I thought I'd kind of show everybody what we see. And you can see these worms have really started growing in size, and they're starting to break down all of the kitchen scraps that we've been putting in here. So the dirt's still moist. If it were dry, I'd probably get a squirt bottle and do a little bit more sprays with water to make sure they stay moist. But I mean, honestly, they look better than I expected them to. So I'm really happy with how this is working out. So now that the worms are all ready to go, they're inside this tote. They've got fresh bedding, they've got kitchen scraps. What they're going to do is they're going to eat through that and start going through the soil and take all the nutrients they can from it. Over a period of about 3 to 4 months, they'll start depleting some of those resources as far as the bedding and the kitchen scraps. You're going to want to periodically open it up and continue to add your kitchen scraps and make sure that the dirt is still somewhat moist and that there's enough for them to eat. When you start noticing that the bedding is becoming depleted or it's just completely full of castings, it's time to add the third layer. And so what we do is we prepare the third layer exactly the same way we prepared the second layer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to remove the cardboard and the newspaper from the top, and we're going to lay the third layer back on top of this existing layer. And what'll happen is once they've depleted everything from this middle layer, they'll start making their way up through those 1/4-inch holes that we cut when we originally built the totes, and they'll start going into the fresh ground that doesn't have their castings in it, and they'll go and look for fresh food. After a period of time, and you'll have to go in there and check periodically, you'll notice that the majority of the worms have traveled into the top bin. And once that happens, we can remove the center bin and you can harvest your castings. The other thing to keep in mind is that the worms will only continue to compost as long as the weather is roughly lower than 80 degrees. So make sure you place them in a place that's not in direct sunlight during the heat of the day, or if possible, you can put them indoors in like a shed or a garage. But if you want to get the most out of them, you want to try to keep that temperature under 80 degrees.
So we're super excited to see how our garden does with the addition of the worm castings over the next few months. Over the next few episodes, we're going to continue to expand our garden, and if you don't want to miss any of our upcoming videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'll put a list of products we use for this project in the description below. Feel free to ask us a question or leave us a comment below. If you liked our video, be sure to hit that thumbs up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.